Howdy guys! Nintendo likes to think that the 3DS is still a thing. Yeah, keep telling yourself that. We, however, know that the 3DS has been dead for quite a while, being crushed to death by the Switch's release in 2017. Now, the Switch might beat the 3DS in every single way, but no one has taken into consideration to see what we've lost since then. Wait, what did we lose again? My romp with the 3DS began when I originally got it for Christmas in 2012. I received the Flame Red model, which I still adore to this day. I always found the glossy red design pretty nice considering I'm a sucker for red things. I remember starting it up for the first time and seeing that classic 3D test screen. Now this is true 3D. Nowadays I think of the 3D as a gimmick, but back then I didn't care. You didn't need glasses for this stuff! The first few games I got for the system were Super Mario 3D Land, Skylanders Swap Force, and LEGO Lord of the Rings. Now I didn't really play a lot of Skylanders or Lord of the Rings, but the main game I loved was Super Mario 3D Land. I had recently finished Super Mario Galaxy 2, so I was ready to dive into a new Mario game. It's alright. Looking back, it didn't really introduce anything new or revolutionary to the formula. It was just a fun experience with great level design and an excellent use of 3D. Another game I liked to play was Ultimate NES Remix. It was a neat little distraction. Basically, it was a compilation of challenges from both the Wii U game and its sequel. It basically took NES games, turned them into little chunks, and then made those chunks into small challenges, and even remixes of older levels. That's nice and all, but this feels way better on a handheld than it ever did on the Wii U. It just feels more natural for a smaller game like this to be on a handheld system, but I had wished it had made use of 3D in order for it to make it more interesting from its Wii U counterparts. Now, I don't really play a lot of Pokemon, but Sun was a really nice game. Alola was a beautiful new region, and the new Alolan forms of Pokemon put a twist on the Pokemon that I had known before. That being said, however, the only two Pokemon games I played were Pearl and Sun, and I haven't played Sun in years, so you can tell how I feel about Pokemon now. I don't know, I'm not an RPG kind of guy. I like it for the first few hours, but then I get bored halfway through and stop playing. RPGs aren't those kinds of games that you can just leave alone for a while and expect to know what to do as soon as you come back to it. It wasn't very interesting to me. That's why I really don't like to play RPGs, but Pokemon was fun while it lasted. And speaking of not being very interesting, Paper Mario Sticker Star was way more underwhelming than I first thought. I don't know, I just did not enjoy the amount of backtracking, how it ruins the flow of the story. Like I said, I'm not a big RPG fan anyway, so I don't think this game was for me. Having been a longtime player of Mario Kart Wii, Mario Kart 7 was such a great game. The new tracks are very creative and fun, and the retro tracks brought a whole new refreshing look to them, although character choice was not their top priority. Instead of Waluigi, we got the Honeybee from Super Mario Galaxy. Overall, it's a pretty fun game. New Super Mario Bros. 2 was an okay experience for me. It wasn't a bad game. It was just highly unoriginal. Like, all the music and level design was ripped straight from New Super Mario Bros. Wii. You can't expect me to know the difference between the two when I'm in a small room with the lights off. But what if you're bored with all of those games you got at the store and looking for fun, cheap little distractions? Well, then the Nintendo eShop was the thing for you. Not only could you download eShop exclusive games and even older DSiWare games, but you could download full retail games onto an SD card, which was crazy to me at the time. Neither the Wii or DSi shops had that, which was always a big bonus for me. The eShop exclusives were the 3DS equivalent to WiiWare and DSiWare, although I vastly prefer those library of games. The 3DS download-only games suffer from a little thing I like to call mediocrity. Now, the Wii and DS had a lot of shovelware too, but the Wii specifically had a lot more quality titles on the Wii Shop channel than the 3DS. There were so many more recognizable games like Fluidity and Bit Trip Runner. On the 3DS, we have Style Savvy. But that doesn't mean there weren't any good games on the eShop. An example I like to think of is Box Boy. It was a fun puzzle game where you used your body to make blocks, which you could use as platforms to get out of stages. I played the hell out of this when I was in middle school. Unfortunately, I lost interest in the series when the sequels came out. Nowadays, I recommend Box Boy plus Box Girl on the Switch. It's fundamentally the same game, but now in HD. The 3DS was the first system that I beat Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2 on, via the 3D Classic series. Now Mario and Donkey Kong Minis on the Move continued the beating into the ground of the Mini Marios. At least this game tries to do something different with the 3D puzzle mechanics as opposed to 2D, but it still doesn't interest me that much. Dr. Mario Miracle Cure is an upgraded version of Dr. Mario Online RX. Overall, the eShop exclusives weren't the main thing that dragged me into the eShop. No. That was the Virtual Console. Introduced on the Wii, the Virtual Console service essentially let you play classic retro Nintendo games for a low price. It was fascinating to me that I could play games from consoles from decades prior. This is actually how I was introduced to the classic Nintendo consoles like the NES and Game Boy. I distinctly remember beating both Super Mario Land 1 and 2 for the first time on the 3DS Virtual Console. Now, on top of just playing these retro games, it enhanced them as well. For instance, you could play Super Mario Bros. 3 over Download Play, or play Pokemon Red and Yellow battles locally. You could even change the colors and borders, and oh boy, well, that was a quirk. When the 3DS originally launched, people weren't buying it because of the high price. To respond to this, Nintendo made a price cut and introduced the 3DS Ambassadors program, which let early buyers get 10 free NES and GBA games. Now that's cool and all, but the GBA games were never actually made available to the general public. Nintendo says they did this because they couldn't get GBA games to work on the 3DS. What do you mean they don't work? They already exist. Why do you need to lie about this? Another thing people got peeved about were the SNES games. Now, unlike the GBA, they actually did come out in 2016, and only on the new 3DS. Why though? They're perfectly capable of running on the original 3DS. Oh wait, money. Now, the DS had multiple revisions over its life, including the DS Lite and DSi. So when the 3DS came out, people assumed it would also have its own revisions, and well, it did. 3DS XL, new 3DS, new 3DS XL, 2DS, and new 2DS XL. The 3DS XL came out in 2012 and was meant as an upgrade to the original, although it feels way cheaper than the old one, feeling more plasticky than the original's glossy plastic and metal design. However, the bigger screens won me over eventually. Now we can't go 1 year without another 3DS revision. Like, Nintendo at least had the decency to wait maybe 2 years between revisions on the original DS, but now I swear every day I find a new one in the trash can. Case in point, the new 3DS. This was a huge upgrade over the original 3DS. It came with interchangeable faceplates, built-in amiibo support, interchangeable faceplates, super stable 3D that tracked your head, interchangeable faceplates, faster processor, and interchangeable faceplates, and a nipple! This little thing called the C-Stick. This little nub exists to only shut people up about it having a second circle pad. Another complaint the 3DS had when it first launched was that it needed a second circle pad. Of course it really didn't, but the PS Vita had one, so why not the 3DS? To combat this, they released the Circle Pad Pro. This was a huge clunky peripheral that added a second circle pad and 2 triggers. No one bought it, and not a lot of games supported it, but hey, no one cared about it after that, so mission completed. Around the same time the new 3DS came out, the XL model was also introduced. The only complaint I have with this is that they got rid of the interchangeable faceplates! Well, that doesn't even matter, because this is hands down the definitive version of the 3DS. It's basically the new 3DS with larger screens, but that's all I really needed. Want to hear something funny? The 2DS! This was created in 2013 in response to parents being concerned that the 3D could harm their children's health. Yeah, I never really understood this, for one. What do you think this thing's for? Second of all, what is this design? I think they made this cheese wedge looking thing to make it look more appealing to young children and cut costs, but I think it's counterintuitive. If this is supposed to be the kid-friendly version of the 3DS, then why did they get rid of the hinges? If some kid drops it, the screen is way more vulnerable to scratches and cracks than before, but who am I to judge? It's $80 and that's a bargain. I can definitely tell this is the cheaper option. For instance, the buttons feel kind of squishy in my hands, and these giant L and R buttons feel weird to me. I don't know, maybe children are into cheese wedges these days. It wasn't a bad experience by any means, but I definitely stick to my new 3DS. Now, one 2DS was bad enough, but what if I told you that they announced a new 2DS XL? After the Switch came out. They made a complete overhaul in the design here. I'm glad the hinges are back, but why did they need to change just about everything else? It looks nothing like the 2DS or even the new 3DS XL. That looked like a premium 3DS, and this looks like one of those rock candy Wii Remote knockoffs. And now, a series of questions you were probably asking yourself about these design choices. Why are the cameras on the bottom half? Why does the top look like a cheap Android phone? Why aren't the speakers on the top? Why are the speakers on the bottom? Where my hands are? This is just really an odd decision on Nintendo's part, especially since their new console, the Nintendo Switch, was already popular. That Switch, by the way, is what ultimately led to its I'd like to say the beginning of the end for the 3DS began around 2015. A lot of the new 3DS games being released around this time were pretty subpar. The Wii U got a lot of great games this year, but the 3DS was struggling. 2016 was better, but still not great. Not a lot of big announcements were made due to the fact Nintendo was preparing for the release of the Nintendo Switch, then known as the NX. Even back then, the NX was rumored to be a handheld home console hybrid, which could spell the end of the 3DS. However, just before the recently announced Switch launched, Nintendo stated that not only were they going to continue supporting the 3DS along with the Switch, they were even thinking about making a successor too. And they semi-kept their promise. 2017 was kind of a resurgence for 3DS games with Nintendo releasing their first-party titles. I hadn't played on my 3DS around this time because I was investing a lot of time in my Switch. Why wouldn't you? The Switch had HD graphics, amazing games, and was an excellent console overall, so why did the 3DS still exist? Nintendo still supported it, with very heavy quotation marks around that. I never understood why they did this. Instead of focusing their development efforts towards the Switch, they made re-releases or best-of compilations. A big example I like to think of is WarioWare Gold. Now before you get mad at me for knocking a WarioWare game, hold up. WarioWare Gold is a great game. It combines all the greatest microgames from previous entries while still having a story. Sure, it wasn't the greatest story, but I was fine with that. The reason I'm a little upset was because they could have made a new WarioWare game taking advantage of the Switch's features like HD Rumble and motion controls. I'm not saying it won't happen, but come on. 2019 is the year that I'd say was the end of the 3DS. Nintendo released some games this year, but they did not do too well. It didn't make an appearance at E3 2019 at all, and when Doug Bowser was interviewed about it, he said that Nintendo had no future plans for first-party titles. And finally, we reached 2020. The closest thing to a successor to the 3DS is the Nintendo Switch Lite. I mean, it's the same price as the new 3DS XL. I'm gonna miss the 3DS. There were a lot of great games released for it, it had great online communities, and even when the going got tough, Nintendo still stuck through till the very end. Yeah, let's go with that. The 3DS may be dead, but I can still breathe new life into it with homebrew. My cousin's an expert with this kind of stuff, so I decided to give it to him for a week and see what he could do. Let's see what he's added to it.